What is up, squad? It is your squid, aka Jill Centauri, and today we've got a story that involves shipwrecks, horses, teen rebellion, exciting primary sources from an 1876 evening on the west coast of Australia, and yeah, a bunch of stuff. So strap yourselves in. I promise it's going to be interesting. Picture this, you're chilling out near your boss's beachside home, watching the horizon, pondering life on horseback, listening to the soothing sound of sand and waves and rock and all of that jazz, maybe just enjoying the serenity. Then, as if without warning, instead of cascading waves breaking in the distance, you spot a passenger steamship way off course. The ship is flopping about haphazardly and without the engines working, destined surely for the jagged rocky coastline that you were just admiring for its beauty, the crashing and bashing of waves suddenly becoming far more ominous than serene. This is a situation that faced Yebble, a Wardanie Aboriginal man, known at the time and in most historical references as Samuel Isaac. And the story of what happened next is pretty amazing, and as usual though, we're going to take a back step and we're going to learn the context first. The SS Georgette was a steamship originally manufactured in England, and it was sold to some people in Western Australia while one might call it new-ish. Other than a single instance where it was involved in a federal exchange of prisoners within international waters, it lived a fairly unremarkable life as a boat. That is, up until the night of 1879 anyway that we're talking about. Mostly used as a passenger and freight service between various ports in Western Australia and Adelaide, it ran the same course a whole boatload of times. See what I did there? Anyway, on the night of its sinking, the SS Georgette had been attempting to make the journey from Fremantle to Bunbury to Busselton to Albany and to Adelaide. It was carrying 50 passengers, 8 crew, and a cargo that included a whole bunch of 9-metre long jarrah timbers. Incidentally, when I was working as a removalist, I had to lift or move a dining table with a bunch of other people that was made from jarrah, and that stuff is bloody heavy. I do not recommend it. It's thought that one of those timbers falling in the cargo hold was the reason for the leak in the hull that eventually caused the sinking on that night. In a letter to the local newspaper a few months after the sinking, a surviving passenger from the ill-fated journey, named Annie Simpson, recalled that the horrific nature of the sinking, as well as the terrifying temperatures and waves.
We were called out of our beds and could not stay to dress. I had slept in an old dress that night because I felt rather sick. My baby had on only a little dress and we were all barefooted. It was cold in the early morning wind, so I asked the man if he would get me a blanket to put around the baby. He refused. After a little while, I asked another man if he would please get me a blanket for my baby. He went and had to run through the big waves that were sweeping over the deck, but he got back with 2 blankets, one for the baby and one for me.
It's not known if the brave blanket-obtaining man survived or not, because she didn't end up getting his name. Anyway, I reckon we should probably go back to Yebble at this point, who is, again, around here, but he's the main character in our story, so we'll go back. It was around now in Annie's story that he saw was what was going on and what was going to happen from afar. The steamboat had its sails up, and ineffective and minuscule though they were, Yebble knew that to mean that their engines had died, and that the boat was doing its best to get to the shoreline through the feeble power of wind. What Yebble knew, though, about that shoreline that the skipper of the SS Georgette didn't, was that shoreline in that bay actually meant rocks and unpredictably high waves. There was no way a boat of that size would make it in there because of the rocks, nor was there any chance of a lifeboat staying afloat for long enough to actually save someone in those waters because of the waves. He must have known in that moment that no one would make it off the boat alive without assistance from the shore. Assistance from him. So he took off. Riding as fast as his horse could carry him, Yebble nearly flew up to his boss's house. He knew the patriarch of the home was away for business, yet he was positive he would be able to wrangle some other workers to assist in the rescue. Yebble was a stock rider for the Bussell family, who were a relatively or reasonably well-off family in the region. They'd pioneered the land between Augusta and Busselton, and, the surname Bussell in Busselton. I don't know what pioneering the land actually means. I think they put fences up where land already was, but Anyway, I digress. He knew they hired many people to work on their property, and he presumably figured the more people involved in the rescue, the more people that they could save. Yebble was wrong about the amount of people on the property at the time, though. And he was also wrong about the willingness to help or their desire to assist. The only people at home in the dwelling were the mother and the daughter of the Bussell family, Ellen and Grace Bussell, respectively. Bursting into the first room he reached, their kitchen, Yebble alerted them to the disaster that was about to occur off their shore. Thankfully, they each leapt into action, just as he had. The mother, Ellen, took to alerting members of the public on the property and in the fields nearby. She initially advised her daughter Grace to do this, though Grace had refused. Grace, on the other hand, at 16 years of age, saddled up her horse and rode back to the beach with Yebble. So let's do a quick recap here, okay? There's a boat sinking off the coastline over here, south of Perth in 1876. An Aboriginal man and a 16-year-old girl are the rescue party in 1876. Aboriginals and women weren't exactly bastions of social acceptance back then, let's remember. Personally, I really think that pondering on that lends something extra to this story, you know, and to their bravery. They were going to save people, or they were going to the rescue of their common person just because it was the right thing to do. Our mate on the boat, Annie Simpson, recalled her experience as it sank, and she wrote,
Just then, another big wave struck the lifeboat and threw it against the ship's side. It broke clean in half from end to end, and I shall never forget the awful screams that went up. All in a few seconds we were struggling in the water, and it was then that most of the lives were lost. I floated out on my back, saw the broken boat turn over and float away, and saw the Georgette for the last time. The next wave hid it from my view. My baby was rolled in his blanket like a little Indian baby. I had my left arm around him, holding him on top of my body, and I held my right arm and limbs rigid in an effort to keep on floating. I believe I was all alone, as I could not see or hear anyone else. The hairpins were all gone, and my hair was being washed around my head like seaweed. I remember going under twice, and then I was asleep.
And she wasn't the only one who thought that they were done for that night. By the time that Yebble and Grace had arrived at the beach, the SS Georgette had run aground, and it had split in half. The lifeboats were capsized or capsizing, and people were drowning, or worse, being crushed by rocks as they were thrust into them by the waves, then drowning. There was no waiting for the cavalry of workers that would evidently never come, or people in the public. It was now or never. Yebble and Grace had to act, so they rode out into the water on horseback. For over 4 hours, Grace Bussell and Yebble, or Samuel Isaacs, ferried passengers to shore with their horses, swimming through the rocks and through the waves. They managed to save many lives. Out of a total of 58 people on board the Georgette, only 4 people drowned. Grace was awarded a silver medal by the Royal Humane Society, and her father was compensated for the troubles, as the Bussell family had fed and clothed the surviving passengers in the days after the wreck. Remembering that he was away for business when the entire fiasco occurred, I can't imagine that Grace's dad was all that troubled himself. Again, I digress. Yebble received a bronze medal from the Royal Humane Society, and it was in the name of Samuel Isaacs. Somewhat underwhelming in my opinion, considering the crucial role that he played. It's not all bad though, because Yebble was also gifted 100 acres of Crown land, of his choosing, by the Western Australian government. He chose a plot of land near the Margaret River, just by Prevalley, which is down here. If you Google Maps Busselton, you'll find it. But yeah, he lived there with a very large family and lived out his days, friends with Grace Bussell until his death. Speaking of Grace, a lot of people remember this as her story, and I think that's due to the presumption that in 1876, a 16-year-old white girl would be more palatable as a hero than a 31-year-old Aboriginal stock rider. But Yebble's life and his bravery are only remembered through a plaque in the town of Busselton, nearby to where the rescue occurred, and I don't think that is sufficient. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope now that you know about Yebble, you'll be interested to look into more history and Australian history stories. Don't forget, I have another one on my channel at the moment. This is the second that I've posted. You might be watching this at some point in the future where I have hundreds though. So subscribe to my channel, let me know what you thought. Leave a comment below if you liked this story or if you didn't like this story, or if you have any feedback whatsoever or any Australian history story you want me to look into further and do one of these for. I am literally all ears. Let me know, guys. I'll see you when I look at you.